My name is Nathan Carter. I was the invisible one in the family until they used my name to take out loans, transfer assets, and erase all accountability. I stayed silent for over a decade until they threw my brother's wedding, at the very estate I had secretly bought back from them. That night, in front of hundreds of guests, I simply raised my glass as the venue manager stepped up to the mic and said, "Sundown Estate is owned by Nathan Carter." The sun had just begun to dip into the Pacific when I pulled up to Sundown Estate. Malibu was dressed in gold, the ocean glinting like it had something to prove. I parked at the edge of the gravel driveway, took a long breath, and adjusted my collar. Even from a distance, the estate looked unreal. Italian columns, manicured hedges, strings of soft glowing lights already flickering to life. I'd bought this place 2 years ago under a shell company. No one here knew it. That was the point. Guests were already trickling in, dressed to the nines. Laughter, champagne glasses clinking, the smell of money and old grudges lingered in the air. I walked slowly toward the entrance, hands in my pockets. I wasn't invited out of love. I was there because not inviting me would have raised questions. Inside, the grand hall was buzzing. Crystal chandeliers hung from 20-foot ceilings, and every corner of the estate gleamed like it was cut from gold. That's when I saw him. Gregory Carter, my father. 60, with his perfectly trimmed gray beard and the same arrogance he wore like a tailored suit. He turned, eyes locking on me. And just loud enough for the nearest relatives to hear, he said, "Nathan, I wasn't sure you'd show up. I guess even the black sheep deserves a plate of prime rib once in a while." A few cousins laughed awkwardly. I nodded slightly. No smile, no reaction. Just enough acknowledgement to let him know I heard. My brother Brandon was nearby, surrounded by friends, groomsmen, a few of our extended family. He looked every bit the golden sun in his white tux. Vivian, our stepmother, hovered nearby, already half a glass of wine in. She hadn't seen me yet. As I made my way past them, pretending not to notice, a familiar voice cut through the room, smooth, calm, and slightly amused. "You clean up nice, Nathan." I turned. Natalie. She stood there in a sleek black dress, clipboard in hand, headset tucked discreetly behind her ear. The manager of Sundown Estate. My old friend. The only person here who knew the truth. "Hey, Nat," I said. "You really pulled this off? It looks beautiful." Her smile widened. "You mean we pulled this off? Don't forget whose name is on the deed, even if no one else knows." I glanced around. Gregory was still smirking in my direction, but Vivian had finally spotted me. Her face tightened for a second before melting back into a practiced warmth. I kept my voice low. "Let's keep it that way. I didn't come here to make a scene." Natalie raised an eyebrow. "No scene. Just letting people enjoy a wedding in a venue that their family thinks they can mock you in." The irony is delicious. Her words had a playful edge, but I knew she was holding back more than she was saying. "Everything okay?" I asked. She hesitated for a beat. "Fine. Just keep your ears open. There's some chatter going around about asset transfers, and your name might have been tossed into a few conversations." I nodded slowly, jaw tightening. "Welcome to the Carter family reunion. Same lies, new setting." We stood there a moment longer before she was pulled away by a staff member needing direction. I moved toward the edge of the garden where the cocktail hour was setting up. Servers weaved between guests with trays of hors d'oeuvres and glasses of rosé. Gregory passed behind me, speaking just loud enough for nearby guests to catch it. "Didn't know they let the help join the party. Times really have changed." I didn't turn around. Just sipped my drink and watched the sea beyond the bluff. That view, that house, that estate, all mine. And still I was the outsider. invisible in plain sight, and that was exactly how I wanted it, for now. The music faded as my mind drifted somewhere else, somewhere colder. I was 12 the year my mother died, cancer swift and merciless. One week she was laughing in the kitchen, the next she was in hospice. Santa Barbara never felt the same after that. My father remarried within a year. Vivian was elegant, charming, and completely uninterested in anything that had to do with me. She came with perfume pearls and a carefully veiled dislike. I wasn't her son, and she never let me forget it. Gregory changed too. Maybe he always was that way and I had just been too young to notice. But after Mom passed, he stopped pretending. The warmth left his voice. The conversations grew shorter. Soon I became more of a ghost in my own home. Birthdays became afterthoughts. One year I found a card on the kitchen table with no name on it. It wasn't signed, just folded shut with a blank envelope. I remember looking around, wondering if it had been left by mistake. I still have that card. It's in a drawer tucked between job offer letters and deeds to properties. Proof of how little I mattered. Brandon, though, he got everything. New sneakers, guitar lessons, trips to Big Bear. When he turned 16, they threw him a surprise party at a beach house. I wasn't invited. I was upstairs that night watching the headlights pull into the driveway, hearing laughter I wasn't a part of. Grandma June was the only one who saw me. She'd visit once a month, bring lemon bars and crossword puzzles. She'd run her hand over my hair and whisper that I was strong, that my mother would be proud. I clung to her like a raft. One Christmas, Gregory forgot to buy me a gift. He blamed work, said he'd been too busy with a merger. Vivian gave me a used book from a thrift store. The price tag was still on the back. Grandma June noticed. That night, she pulled me aside and slipped me a $50 bill. I bought myself a coat. It wasn't that I needed more stuff. It was the principle. I was living in the shadows of a house that used to be mine, watching my father pour love and money into a new family while I learned to become invisible. The older I got, the more I realized I had two choices: stay and rot in resentment, or leave and build something that couldn't be ignored. I chose the latter. At 19, I packed a duffel bag, left a note on my desk, and walked out without saying goodbye. It's funny, really. All these years later, standing in the middle of a venue they think belongs to someone else, and I still feel that same ache in my chest. That same need to prove that I was never the problem. Someone laughed nearby, loud and sharp. I blinked, dragged myself back to the present. The estate buzzed with celebration, but I could still feel the cold of that old house in Santa Barbara wrapped around my ribs. Natalie walked past me with a clipboard, caught my eye, and gave me a look. She knew where I'd gone in my head. I gave her the smallest nod. There'd be time for memories later. Right now, there was a wedding to get through. The decision didn't come with fireworks or screaming. It came in silence, the kind that settles in after years of not being heard. I was 19. I had a full ride to UC Irvine, a major in economics, and a family that barely remembered what I looked like unless they needed something. It was a Thursday when I packed the duffel. 3 pairs of jeans, some shirts, an old laptop that Grandma June had helped me buy secondhand. I didn't tell anyone. There was no goodbye. Just a note left on my desk that read, "I need more than this. Nathan." Los Angeles was the closest thing I could afford. I took the Greyhound, landed downtown, and rented a room in a 2-bedroom apartment with a guy named Troy who sold vape pens at Venice Beach. Rent was split cash, utilities were optional, and I got a job bussing tables at a bar in Culver City. The first year was a blur. I worked 2 jobs, took online courses when I could, and learned fast that nobody cared where you came from in LA as long as you paid your rent. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was choosing my story. Then came the fire escape night. I'd just gotten off a closing shift, shoes soaked in beer, hands raw from scrubbing pans. I climbed up to the roof of the building with a warm beer and sat alone, staring out over the flickering skyline. I remember thinking I made it out. That has to count for something. A week later, I bumped into Natalie. It was a job fair hosted by a real estate startup trying to attract young agents. I was mostly there for the free bagels. Natalie was there as a junior recruiter. We hadn't spoken in years. She wore a navy blazer and had a voice that made people stop mid-sentence. She saw me from across the room and walked over like she'd been expecting me, said my name like it still meant something. Nathan Carter. Didn't think I'd see you here. I laughed and told her I didn't think anyone would. We caught up over cold coffee at a folding table near the elevator. She had interned through college, worked her way up, and now had a say in who got hired. I told her I was working nights and trying to figure things out. She looked at me for a long second, then handed me a card. Their company, Meridian West Realty, was expanding. They needed people who weren't afraid to grind. She told me I was good at reading people, always had been. That was the last nice thing anyone said to me in a while. I interviewed that week, got the job, entry level, barely above minimum wage, but it was a start. I filed paperwork, answered phones, and watched the agents close deals like sharks in suits. I soaked it all in. How they spoke, how they negotiated, what made clients nod and sign. Natalie checked in every few weeks. She gave me tips on how to track leads, how to stay composed when clients pushed back. She believed in me in a way that felt dangerous, like it might actually lead somewhere. By 21, I had my license. By 23, I was closing my own deals. Meridian West opened a second office, and I transferred out, hungry for bigger clients. I spent long nights in a cramped apartment building, floor plans, zoning laws, and property tax code. The work consumed me, and I let it. I stopped answering calls from Gregory. Not that he called often. When he did, it was clipped obligatory, always ending with a reminder that Brandon had just gotten into NYU or had been promoted to team captain. I smiled through gritted teeth and hung up. Vivian never called. Not once. Grandma June sent me postcards, little notes with pressed flowers or scribbled recipes. I kept them all in a box. Sometimes they were the only reason I didn't quit. Natalie and I stayed close, but we kept it professional. There was something unspoken between us, maybe a shared understanding of what it meant to start with nothing and build from there. She was rising fast, too. Within 4 years, she was head of operations. One night, over whiskey and closing contracts, she looked at me and said, "You know you could run your own company. You're already halfway there." I laughed, but she didn't. She looked serious. She meant it. And maybe that was the first time I started to believe it, too. The wedding music picked up again. Applause erupted from the reception hall. Someone must have given a toast. I stood at the edge of the lawn, watching the guests sway under twinkling lights, and thought of that rooftop in LA. The warm beer, the quiet promise I made to myself. I made it out, and now I was coming back on my own terms. The morning I filed for the LLC, it was pouring in downtown LA. I remember standing under a rusted awning with a coffee that tasted like ash, watching traffic blur past. Carter Lux Estates. That was the name I wrote on the form. Clean, professional, nothing flashy. Just my name. It felt like staking a flag into the ground of a place that once ignored me. By 2015, I had enough savings and grit to go out on my own. The industry was brutal, but I had been absorbing everything like a sponge. Zoning loopholes, equity flips, silent investor strategies. While others played loud, I learned to play quiet. Let my work speak. Let my bank account whisper. Natalie helped more than she probably should have. She connected me to a lawyer who specialized in real estate structuring, helped me design clean entities with hidden ownership, told me about land deals before they hit market. She never asked why I wanted to stay invisible. Maybe she already knew. That same year, I came across a listing buried in an off-market file. Sundown Estate, Malibu, oceanfront 12 bedrooms, former celebrity ownership. It had just been sold off quickly below value by a desperate family trust. The moment I saw the name on the record, my stomach turned. Gregory Carter. Apparently, Brandon had racked up serious gambling debts during his second year at NYU. Gregory sold one of the few properties he held solely under his name to bail him out. But instead of managing the sale himself, he used an intermediary. The estate landed in the hands of a holding firm in Westwood, which flipped it to a second party. They never looked past the signature. That second party was me. Through a shell company based in Nevada, I acquired Sundown Estate for just under $1 million. It was a steal, and it was personal. I never told Natalie the full story, only that I wanted to own a piece of Malibu real estate with wedding potential. She helped me scout contractors, refine the landscaping, and quietly convert it into one of the most in-demand venues along the coast. We kept the ownership anonymous. I liked it that way. No fanfare, just a slow, quiet reclaiming of what was once used to erase me. I remember standing in the great hall for the first time after renovations were complete. The floors gleamed. The chandeliers were imported from Italy. Every window opened to the kind of view you only see in movies. And it was mine. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about independence. It was about finally having something no one could take or question. No name on a lease, no father looming overhead, just me. Sometimes I'd drive out there at night when the venue was empty, park near the bluff, sit in the garden with a drink and watch the moonlight hit the water. I'd think about that little boy in Santa Barbara who counted the cracks in his bedroom ceiling because sleep felt like a trap. I'd tell him, "You did it. You really did it." Then came the email. Brandon and Vivian were planning a wedding. Budget unlimited, coastal location. Vivian wanted views. Brandon wanted prestige. They landed on Sundown Estate completely unaware. Natalie forwarded me the inquiry with no comment. Just the thread, the request, the attached guest list. I stared at it for a long time. I could have said no, blocked the date, canceled. But I didn't. I let them book. I even offered a quiet discount through the company. Just enough to make it easy. And then I said nothing. Natalie looked at me across the table at dinner that week. "You sure you're okay with this?" I nodded. "Totally. It's just business." She didn't believe me, but she didn't press. That was the moment it shifted, not the buying, not the building, the letting them walk into something they thought they owned, the letting them celebrate on ground they once sold to erase a mistake. That was when the seed cracked open. It would grow quietly under the lights and champagne and hollow toasts. And eventually it would bloom. Dinner service had started a low hum of clinking glasses and shallow laughter threading through the open air. Guests moved fluidly between courses, their polished manners on full display. I stood near the hedge wall, tucked in the shadows, watching them from the edge of it all. It was exactly how I liked it. Out of sight, present, but invisible. Natalie approached without a word, 2 glasses of water in her hands. She handed me one, nodding toward the back of the venue away from the main garden. We walked together, scent, until we reached the side path near the hydrangeas. "You really don't want them to know?" she asked quietly. I took a sip, the water cool and grounding. "No," I said. "That's not what this is about." She tilted her head, studying me. "You sure? Because it looks a hell of a lot like poetic justice. Especially tonight." I glanced back at the guests. Gregory was laughing too loudly at his own joke. Brandon was taking pictures with the bridal party. Vivian was on her third glass of Pinot, smiling through tight lips. I don't need their recognition, I said. I just need them to stay out of my way. Natalie hesitated, then reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document. She handed it to me. I opened it slowly. It was a deed transfer draft. Gregory's name, Vivian's signature as power of attorney, and in the beneficiary line a legal entity linked to my old college address. I stared at it. What is this? Vivian's been working with a broker in Encino. They're trying to move the last of Gregory's separate assets into a trust. But she listed you as a reference signature in one of the applications, said she had your approval. My jaw tightened. I hadn't spoken to Vivian in over 5 years. The idea that she would use my name for a deal she knew nothing about made my stomach turn. How did you get this? She shrugged, her voice low. One of our title partners flagged it, said it didn't pass standard verification. He sent it to me because your name came up. I thought you should know. I folded the document and slid it into my jacket pocket. That's why you've been acting weird all evening. Partly, she admitted, and partly because I don't trust them. Not with your name, not with anything. They'll use whatever they can to protect their image. You know that. Yeah, I said, looking back toward the tented dining area. I do. We stood there in silence, just the two of us in the soft dark, the sound of waves somewhere beyond the cliffs. The laughter was louder now, rising with the wine. She finally said, I'm scared they're going to drag you back into their mess. I don't want that for you. I gave her a small smile. They can't. Not this time. Everything's in my name now. My world. My rules. Still, I felt the warning settle deep in my chest. This wasn't over. Not yet. I hadn't seen Brandon alone all evening. He'd been orbiting the wedding crowd like a minor celebrity, flashing that winning grin, arms slung over shoulders, offering toasts and hugs like he'd earned them. So when he broke from the circle and strolled toward me near the drinks table, I tensed without realizing it. He was in full groom mode, white dinner jacket tailored within an inch of its life. A boutonniere perfectly pinned. He wore confidence like a scent, thick and heavy. Well, look who finally shows up to a family event without looking like he crawled out of a basement, he said, half laughing. Nice to see you too, Brandon. He clinked his glass against mine. Don't be like that. I meant it in a good way. You look decent, almost respectable. I took a small sip, watching his eyes. He was trying, or pretending to. Didn't think you'd come, he continued. Vivian thought you'd bail. Dad took bets. I raised an eyebrow. Who won? He grinned. Me. I said you wouldn't pass up free filet mignon. I smirked, but it didn't reach my eyes. How's married life treating you a whole 3 hours in? He shrugged. Ask me after the honeymoon. But hey, things are good. Finally. Dad's helping me get things sorted. Got the last of the debt behind me. Clean slate. I nodded slowly. Must feel good. Brandon leaned in slightly. You know, for all our crap growing up, I gotta say, you didn't turn out as bad as I thought. I tilted my head. That's supposed to be a compliment. He chuckled. Look, man, I mean it. You always kept to yourself, never really did anything big, but hey, you stayed out of the way. Respect. I stared at him for a beat, then said, You mentioned Dad helped you clear your debt. Was that recently? Brandon hesitated for a split second, then nodded. Yeah. He had to shuffle some stuff around, sell off that old property in Topanga. Said it was in your name technically, but like for tax stuff. Nothing serious. My stomach dropped. I kept my face still. Wait, what do you mean my name? He waved his hand dismissively. Oh, you know how Dad is. Always moving stuff around. Said it made things easier for the books back in the day. Used your info for a couple filings, nothing shady. All cleaned up now, all cleaned up now. I forced a tight smile. Got it. He clapped me on the shoulder too hard to be casual. Anyway, glad you're here. Means a lot. Even if you're still the quiet one. He walked off back into the lights, leaving me with a swirl of noise and something colder. Vivian using my name to shift assets, Gregory using my identity to manage debt, and Brandon casually confirming the very thing I had feared. My name wasn't just remembered now. It had been used, exploited, worn like a mask for their convenience. I stood, frozen fingers tightening around the stem of my glass. This wasn't over. It was unraveling. The string of lies didn't start here. It never does. It always has a root, and mine ran back further than most people could understand. I didn't need Brandon's smug grin or his careless confession to remind me what kind of family I came from. I already knew. I had lived it. It was 2009. I was 20. Gregory's construction company, Carter General Contracting, had hit a financial wall during the housing slump. Layoffs were stacking up, invoices delayed, and his partners were threatening to pull out. I remember walking into his office one evening, nervous but determined. He didn't look up when I stepped in, just muttered something about closing the door. I told him I had a proposal. I had been learning a lot at school, watching the real estate market shift, and I wanted to help him restructure the business. Maybe even start a side division focused on property rehab. He could put it under my name if that made things easier. I just wanted to contribute, to belong. He looked up, finally, eyes tired, jaw tight. Then he laughed, a short, bitter thing. You represent the family, Nathan. You don't even represent yourself. The words stung, but I stayed still. Told him I wasn't asking for a title or recognition, just the chance to help. He leaned back, folded his hands. You don't get it. You don't have what it takes. That's not an insult, it's just the truth. Stick to your books, leave the real work to those who can carry it. I left his office without another word. But later that year, I saw my name on a bank notice forwarded to our house. Gregory had used me as a secondary guarantor on a bridge loan, without telling me, without my consent. I confronted him. He shrugged it off. It's nothing, he said. Just paperwork. No risk to you. I needed a clean name to push it through, a clean name. That's what I was to him. I checked the records after that, quietly. Found more filings with my social security number attached. Minor real estate holdings, defunct LLCs. Small debts tied to temporary addresses I never lived at. Gregory had been using my identity like a spare tool. When his own credit was too exposed or when Brandon's name was too risky, he dipped into mine. And because I hadn't built anything yet, there was no institution pushing back. I was invisible on paper. Convenient. I told Grandma June once. She was the only one I trusted. She looked at me and said softly, "That's not right, baby, but you already knew that." She offered to confront him. I told her not to. I didn't want to be saved. I wanted to grow strong enough to protect myself. That's when I made the decision. To build something that couldn't be co-opted. To never again ask for a seat at a table where I was never welcome. It wasn't about revenge, not then. It was survival. And so I stayed quiet, watched, learned, invested in myself. And when the time came, I bought the table. I built the room. Now standing in the middle of the very estate they had once sold to save face, I realized I wasn't just cleaning up old wounds. I was about to uncover the infection still festering beneath. And this time I wouldn't walk away. The next morning, before the cleanup crew even finished their first trash run, I was on the phone with Laura Reyes. She had been my attorney for 5 years ever since I made my first major acquisition. Sharp, discreet, and allergic to drama, she never asked unnecessary questions. When she picked up, I skipped pleasantries. I need a full verification on Sundown Estate, title chain, current deed, any contingent liabilities. Everything. She paused for a beat. Something happened, not yet, but it might. Within 2 hours, she sent back an encrypted folder. Inside were scanned documents, notarized transfers, filings with the county. Everything was airtight. Gregory had indeed signed over the estate legally to a holding company in Twent, never knowing I was behind it. There were no liens, no loopholes. It was mine clean. Still, Laura flagged a minor concern. The notary listed on the transfer was the same one Vivian had used in previous asset sales. That wasn't illegal, but it meant Vivian may have had more involvement than Gregory ever admitted. Laura ended her note with a single line. "You're fine legally. Just watch your back." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She was always right. That afternoon, I met Natalie at her office above the catering wing. She had her laptop open, brows furrowed. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Derek Hunt," she said. "Ring a bell?" "Can't say it does. He's a broker based out of Pasadena. Dirty reputation. Gets rich families to move their less than clean assets through offshore fronts. Vivian met with him twice this month." I sat down slowly. "Doing what's selling the Westbrook property. It's the last of Gregory's personal holdings with any real value. She's trying to liquidate it quietly before it gets tied up in estate reassessment." My pulse ticked up. She added, "And she's listing you again as a co-beneficiary without your knowledge." My voice was flat. "That's twice now. 3 if you count the Shell LLC used to file tax relief claims in 2018 also had your name." She turned the screen to show me. I scanned the form. The signature was forged but clean. Whoever did it had practice. I leaned back, the pieces slotting into place. They hadn't just used me for convenience. They had built a whole side operation assuming I would never notice, or worse, that I wouldn't care. Natalie closed the laptop. "What do you want to do?" I looked out the window. The courtyard below was still scattered with wedding confetti, white folding chairs left in rows. "Nothing. Not yet. You're serious?" I nodded. "If they want a reckoning, they'll get one. But it'll be on my terms, not theirs." She studied me for a long moment, then said Laura was right. "You better watch your back." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "I'm done watching. Now I'm preparing." Emma Wells was never one for small talk. When I called her, she answered on the first ring and got straight to the point. What did they do now? I hadn't even said hello. "Can you meet?" I asked. "Today?" She sighed. "Let me guess. Santa Monica. That diner off Wilshire where we always end up when things go sideways. You read my mind." An hour later, we sat in our usual booth, a chipped red leather seat that had seen better decades. Emma had her laptop open before the waitress even poured our coffee. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Tell me everything," she said. I slid a flash drive across the table. Property records, false filings, deed history, forged documents. Everything Natalie and Laura had uncovered, plus a few things I'd pulled myself over the years but never had the nerve to do anything with. Emma plugged it in, scrolled through her face, a shifting mask of disbelief and quiet fury. "Jesus, they really used your name like a ghost signature. This goes back over a decade." I nodded. "And they're still doing it." She looked up. "So what do you want to do?" I hesitated. "I want the record set straight. I want them to stop using me, but I don't want to ruin them." Emma raised an eyebrow. "That's not how stories like this end, Nathan. If I publish this, there's no half measure. You either go public or you disappear again." I looked out the window past the traffic and palm trees. My reflection in the glass looked tired, older than I felt. I don't care about revenge, I said. I care about the truth, and I want it documented. She leaned back, nodding slowly. You sure? Because once this hits, you're not the quiet brother anymore. You're the guy who torched the family name. I didn't answer. Emma closed the laptop and leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. You remember your high school graduation? Of course. Your dad didn't show. Your stepmother came late. You gave your valedictorian speech to an auditorium half full and walked off the stage alone. I remember. She sat back. And you think they'll take this exposure with grace? I shook my head. I'm not expecting grace. I'm expecting denial. Anger, probably a lawsuit. She smiled faintly. Then you've grown up after all. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, lights off, watching the city move without me. The sound of a neighbor's TV filtered through the walls, faint laughter echoing from the hallway. My phone buzzed once. Emma, draft's ready. You say go, I'll submit. I stared at the screen. For a long time, I did nothing. Then I set the phone down. I got up, made a cup of tea I didn't drink, walked out onto the balcony. The air was cool, the city below flickering like a map of my past. I thought about Grandma June, the only one who ever looked at me like I mattered. I thought about Brandon's careless words, Vivian's forged signature, and Gregory's cold dismissals. Every slight, every moment I was invisible, every instance they said I wasn't enough. I hadn't forgotten a single one. And yet I didn't feel rage, I felt clarity. By morning I had made my decision. I texted Emma one word, go. She replied with a thumbs up. Nothing else. That was her way. I didn't tell Natalie right away. I needed a day to let the decision sit inside me, to feel it settle. That evening she stopped by my office at sundown. She saw my face and said, You did it, didn't you? I nodded. No ceremony, no announcement. She walked to the window and looked out at the vineyard. It was quiet, peaceful, nothing like what was coming. They're going to fight back, she said. I know, and they'll play dirty. They always do. She turned and met my eyes. Then let's not pretend you're the same scared kid who ran away. Not anymore. I smiled this time for real. Let them come. If they were going to keep using me as their shield, then it was time to become something else. Something they couldn't hide behind anymore. The ballroom glowed under amber lights, laughter rising above the clink of silverware and soft jazz from a live quartet. Waiters glided between round tables draped in ivory linen, delivering courses too elegant to remember. I sat near the edge, just close enough to watch, just far enough to remain unbothered. My family had mostly forgotten I was there. That was fine. I preferred it that way. Gregory was in his element. He worked the room like a senator, hands on shoulders, leaning in close, always too loud. Vivian, flawless in a champagne silk gown, clung to his side, her smile so polished it looked painful. Brandon and his new wife beamed from their table near the head, basking in attention. To most, it looked like the perfect Carter celebration. But I saw the cracks. The way Vivian's hand trembled slightly when she reached for her glass. The way Brandon's gaze drifted too often toward the doors, like he was waiting for something to go wrong. Then Gregory tapped his glass with a dessert spoon. The room quieted instantly. Family and friends, he boomed, thank you for being here tonight. What a beautiful occasion. My son Brandon has found the love of his life, and we are all blessed to witness it. There were polite murmurs, applause. And of course he continued gesturing around. We owe thanks to this incredible venue. When Brandon told me where he wanted the wedding, I thought he was dreaming. But my boy made it happen. That's the Carter way. I felt Natalie move behind me before I heard her. She stepped forward calm and composed and took the microphone from the stand. Her heels clicked with purpose. "Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment to add something to Mr. Carter's lovely toast." Gregory blinked. Vivian's lips parted just slightly. Natalie smiled. "And while we're thanking the venue, let's give a very special thanks to its owner. This estate, Sundown, is owned by none other than Nathan Carter." Silence. Not stunned gasps. Not a burst of applause. Just complete, breathless silence. I didn't move. I didn't stand. I simply lifted my glass, nodding once toward the stage. Eyes turned, some in curiosity, some in confusion. Gregory's mouth opened, then shut. His hand dropped from Vivian's shoulder. She froze mid-sip, her wineglass tilting just enough to spill a few crimson drops onto her dress. Brandon's head whipped around, and for the first time that day, his smile vanished. A whisper rippled through the guests, quiet but sharp. "He owns this place, wait." "Is that true?" Gregory stepped forward, voice thin. "There must be some mistake." Natalie held up her hand. "No mistake. The property title is public record. If anyone would like to verify it, I have a copy." She didn't wait for a response. She simply turned and walked off stage, her heels echoing like punctuation. I stayed seated, swirling my wine, letting the moment stretch. My chest didn't burn with triumph. It felt still, anchored, like a door had quietly closed behind me. Gregory turned toward me, a tight smile barely stretching across his face. His eyes, however, were sharp and frantic. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said through clenched teeth. I took a sip. "You never asked." Brandon stood abruptly but said nothing. His wife tugged gently at his sleeve, whispering something urgent. Vivian dabbed at her dress with a napkin, but her hand kept shaking. A few guests began to murmur again, shifting in their chairs. Some looked toward me with new curiosity, some with discomfort. I rose slowly, setting my glass down. No speech, no declaration. I walked toward the door. Natalie met me there. "Well," she said, "that worked." I didn't respond. I just opened the door and stepped into the cool Malibu night, the weight of years sliding off my shoulders like a coat finally ready to be set down. The night air was crisp and quiet, in stark contrast to the thick tension I had left behind. My steps were slow, deliberate. Each footfall on the stone path felt like a punctuation mark to the sentence I had just closed. Behind me, the ballroom buzzed with whispers. It wouldn't take long before speculation gave way to confrontation. But I wouldn't be there for it. The valet offered a polite nod, already reaching for keys I didn't request. I waved him off gently. "I'm not leaving just yet," I said. "Nathan." I turned. Natalie stood just outside the doorway, her arms folded loosely across her chest. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her eyes said enough. We stood there not as childhood friends or co-conspirators, but simply as two people who had seen too much and chosen peace instead of fireworks. She walked toward me, stopping only when she was close enough to reach for my hand. "That was bold," she said softly. I didn't respond. They know now. That's what matters. We stayed like that for a while. No rush, just silence and the hum of night insects around the vineyard. Back inside, the chaos had begun to surface. Through the glass, I saw Gregory standing stiff, arguing quietly with Vivian. Brandon sat down heavily, jaw clenched, looking more lost than angry. They weren't falling apart, not yet, but the cracks were showing. I took a breath, adjusted my jacket, and stepped back into the ballroom. Heads turned. No one approached me. I walked toward the nearest table, nodded at a couple of guests I vaguely recognized. Then I made my way around the room, one table at a time. I shook hands. I smiled. I offered quiet, polite goodbyes. Most people didn't know what to say. A few murmured congratulations. Some just nodded in awkward silence. But all of them looked at me differently now. Not as the invisible son, not as the one who had disappeared. They saw me. At last I approached the head table. Vivian didn't look up. She focused on the wine stain on her gown, rubbing at it with a linen napkin long since useless. Brandon stood as I neared. Nathan, I didn't know about the place or anything. I know, I said. He searched my face for something. Anger, maybe. A chance to make it right. You've built something. I never thought that's the problem, Brandon. You never thought. He nodded, swallowing hard. I didn't say goodbye to Gregory. He stood off to the side, watching jaw-tight hands clenched. I met his gaze. He didn't look away, but he didn't approach. Good. Natalie was waiting by the exit. I joined her, and together we walked out. We didn't rush. We didn't run. We walked like people who had earned the right to leave on their own terms. Outside, the night was colder. Natalie slid her hand into mine. "Where to now?" she asked. "Wherever we want." And we kept walking, the lights of sundown fading behind us. The following morning, the world hadn't shifted, but something in me had. I woke up in my Malibu condo to the hum of the ocean outside and the soft ding of my phone buzzing with messages. The first was from Emma. The article had gone live, headlined, "The Hidden Owner Behind Sundown Estate. Uncovering a Family's Financial Facade." It walked readers through the shell corporations, the overlapping transactions, and most damningly, the loans tied to my name without my consent. I didn't forward the link to anyone. I didn't have to. By noon, it was trending locally. Vivian's name came up in multiple mentions, and Gregory's face was uncomfortably close to a growing number of investigation threads. Emma had written it clean, factual, no vindictive spin. She had asked me if I was sure. I told her the truth. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. Later that day, a letter arrived by courier. The handwriting on the envelope made me freeze. Grandma June. I opened it slowly, smoothing the paper with careful hands. "Nathan," I read the article. "I always knew there was more to the story than what they told us. Your mother would be proud. I am proud. I'm sorry I couldn't do more when you were young. I hope you know you never needed their approval to be worthy. Love always, Grandma." I held the letter for a long time, longer than I expected. That night I returned to Sundown, alone. No gala, no champagne, no guests. Just me. The estate was quiet. My office overlooked the vineyard, bathed in the orange wash of sunset. I stood by the window, the same one I had looked out of the day I closed the deal to buy it. I thought of my mother. I thought of who I had been at 16 and who I had to become to survive. All my life I had tried not to be like Gregory, but I had also spent years hoping he'd one day say he was proud of me. Now I didn't need it. They could think what they wanted, tell whatever story comforted them, but I knew mine. I wasn't a mistake. I wasn't a failure. I had built something, quietly, completely, mine. And when they mocked me, I didn't lash out. I just let them speak. Because I knew the truth would speak louder. I sat down at my desk, opened a new client file, and got back to work. Not for approval, not to prove anything. Just because I could. If you've ever been dismissed by the very people who were supposed to lift you up, remember this. Your value is not defined by their recognition. Stand tall. Reclaim your narrative. The story is yours to finish.